When the fake cops showed up to tow my car, I thought it was a prank, but by the time I realized what they really wanted, it was already too late to pretend this was just about a parking violation. I moved to Brookhaven Ridge because I thought it was quiet, peaceful, the kind of place where people waved when they walked their dogs, and the loudest thing you heard at night was the sprinklers ticking on. After 20 years in federal service, I wanted normal. Normal lasted 3 weeks. It started just before dawn, one of those gray half-light mornings when your body knows something's wrong before your brain catches up. A deep metallic clank, the hiss of hydraulics, and the low rumble of a diesel engine. For a moment, I thought maybe a delivery truck had backed into my driveway by mistake. Then I saw the red and blue flashers through the blinds. At first, I felt that old reflex kick in, the one you get from years in the bureau. Heart steady, breath shallow, mind alert. But what I saw next made me question if I was still half asleep. 2 figures stood by my government-issued SUV. Both wore dark tactical shirts with the words HOA Police stenciled in bright white across the back. One held a clipboard, the other zip ties. Their badges gleamed under the streetlight, but something about them looked off. Plastic sheen, crooked edges, party store quality. I cracked the front door. "Morning," I said. "Something I can help you with?" The taller one, a man built like a linebacker, snapped his chin up. "Sir, we're here on official business. Your vehicle's in violation of Community Code 14B. It's being impounded." "Impounded?" I echoed. "This is a government vehicle." "That's not our concern," the other one, a woman with sharp eyes, cut in. "All residents have to comply with neighborhood standards." Their tone had that fake cop confidence I'd heard 100 times from wannabe enforcers. I'd worked undercover in biker gangs and militia compounds. I knew how power looked when it was borrowed, not earned. "Then you've got paperwork," I said, reaching out a hand. The woman smiled thinly and passed me a single sheet. It looked like it had been printed off a cheap template. No seal, no signature, no court order, just the words HOA Enforcement Division across the top. I let out a quiet breath. "This isn't legal." The man stepped closer. "Sir, you're interfering with an inspection." "Inspection?" I asked. "You're trying to tow a federal vehicle off private property." That's when I noticed her, Karen Miller, standing on the sidewalk behind them, arms folded, robe perfectly pressed. Every neighborhood had one like her, the self-appointed ruler of cul-de-sacs and lawns. She called out, voice syrup sweet, "Morning, Agent Turner. I told our team you might resist. Don't make this harder than it has to be." My pulse slowed, not sped up, slowed. It's what happens when training takes over. I kept my voice calm. "Karen, there is no authorized HOA police. You know that, right?" She tilted her chin. "We restructured. The board voted last month." I almost laughed. "Funny. The state database still lists your HOA as dissolved 2 years ago." Her smile flickered just a bit. The tall man glanced at her for direction. That told me everything. These weren't professionals. They were hired muscle, probably from some fly-by-night security outfit desperate for cash. "Look," I said, "step away from the vehicle before you both get arrested for impersonating law enforcement." The man sneered. "Being FBI doesn't mean you're above the rules." Karen's eyes gleamed. "That's exactly what he thinks," she said to her 2 enforcers. "Go ahead. Document his refusal." They started taking photos of my house, my license plate, my face. That was the first real moment I felt anger. Not because of the threat, but because of the arrogance. The smug certainty that they could invent authority and expect people to obey it. I took 1 step forward. "You've got 5 seconds to leave my property." The man opened his mouth, but before he could speak, the phone in my pocket buzzed. Director Cole. I never got calls from him before 6 a.m. I turned, keeping my tone even. "1 second. Don't walk away from us," the woman barked. But I did. I stepped inside, shut the door, and answered. Cole's voice was sharp. "Turner, get to the office, now." My stomach sank. "Is this about a complaint?" A pause. Then, flatly, "Just get here." When I looked back through the peephole, the 2 officers were still there. Karen was smiling, like a queen who'd just declared war. That's when I realized this wasn't about a car. It was about control. And I'd just become the one man she couldn't control. The next morning, the sun came up looking innocent. I brewed coffee, hoping maybe last night had just been one of those suburban misunderstandings, like neighbors fighting over mailbox height. But the envelope on my doorstep said otherwise. It was thick, official-looking, with my name printed in neat block letters. Notice of violation, Brookhaven Ridge HOA Enforcement Division. Inside was a $5,000 fine and a photograph of my SUV, time-stamped, labeled, unauthorized vehicle on private property. That wasn't a misunderstanding. That was war. Around 9, I walked down to the community office, a beige prefab trailer that looked more like a storage shed than a board headquarters. The door was already open. Inside, Karen Miller was waiting behind a folding table stacked with clipboards, bylaws, and a plastic vase of fake tulips. She smiled like she'd been expecting me. "Agent Turner, I hoped you'd come in to clear this up." Her voice had that honeyed edge, polite enough to sound professional, but laced with condescension, the kind that tells you she's already decided you're guilty. "Clear it up?" I said, setting the notice on the table. "You sent fake officers to my house at 2 in the morning. She folded her hands, pretending surprise. "Oh, that. They're community safety officers, not police. A private contractor. Entirely legal." "Really?" I asked. "Because their badges said HOA police, and one of them threatened to impound federal property." Karen didn't flinch. "You seem tense, Jack. Maybe you're not used to living under neighborhood rules." I felt a slow burn rise behind my ribs. "Neighborhood rules don't override federal law." She leaned back in her chair, studying me like I was a project she'd already mastered. "You know, people around here talk. They say you work for the FBI, but nobody's seen any proof. For all we know, you could be embellishing." That line wasn't random. It was a test. She wanted me defensive, reactive, so I smiled instead. "That's one theory," I said. "The other is that your so-called HOA doesn't exist in the state registry." Karen's smile stiffened. "We're in the process of renewal." "Uh-huh." I flipped open my phone and scrolled to the state corporation database. According to this, Brookhaven Ridge Homeowners Association was dissolved 2 years ago for failure to file taxes. You can't enforce anything. For a heartbeat, something sharp crossed her face. Surprise, maybe even panic. But it vanished so quickly I almost doubted I'd seen it. "You seem very interested in our paperwork," she said coolly. "Maybe too interested." I slipped the phone back into my pocket. "That's my job, Karen. Details." She stood, smoothing her blazer, and handed me a brochure with the HOA logo. "Then you'll appreciate this. We've launched a new program, Community Compliance Initiative. Ensures everyone follows the same standards. Keeps our property values high." I glanced at the glossy cover. Photos of smiling neighbors, trimmed lawns, and, ironically, a police cruiser that wasn't real. "This program," I said, "does it include stalking residents and inventing fines?" Karen's eyes narrowed. "Careful, Agent Turner. You're new here, and we don't take kindly to accusations." "Neither does the Bureau," I replied. We stood there for a long moment, silence heavy between us. Somewhere outside, a leaf blower hummed, ordinary suburban life, pretending nothing was wrong. Finally, she sighed, tilting her head with mock sympathy. "Look, Jack, I'm trying to make this neighborhood safe. People like order, predictability. If you'd just cooperate, we could avoid all unpleasantness." The way she said unpleasantness made my skin crawl. I picked up the violation notice, folded it neatly, and slid it into my jacket. "You want predictability? You'll get it. Every action you take from now on. Documented, time-stamped, and reported." Her expression faltered, just slightly. Then she laughed. "You think you scare me because you carry a badge?" I met her eyes. "No, I think I scare you because I don't need to." As I walked out, I caught a glimpse of a small security camera above the door, its red light blinking. It wasn't city installed. It wasn't even connected to a licensed system. She was recording everything, watching everyone. I remember thinking, this isn't a neighborhood. It's a test site. And somehow, I was the variable she couldn't control. That was the morning I stopped hoping this would blow over. Because Karen Miller wasn't just enforcing rules, she was building her own little government, and I had just declared independence. The next day, my phone started buzzing before sunrise. Not a call, notifications, dozens of them. Someone had posted a video of me. It showed last night's confrontation in my driveway, me standing under the porch light, facing the so-called HOA officers. But the clip was chopped, rearranged, and stripped of context. The sound was distorted, the lighting exaggerated. They'd slowed it down at key moments to make me look aggressive, voice raised, shoulders tense. The caption read, "FBI agent threatens community police over simple violation." Within hours, it had hundreds of shares in the neighborhood forum, local Facebook groups, even the HOA mailing list. Neighbors I hadn't even met yet were posting comments. "He thinks he's above the law. We just want to feel safe again. Maybe the board should remove him." And there it was, the strategy. Karen didn't need to prove I was dangerous. She just needed everyone else to believe it. I'd seen propaganda before, in war zones, in criminal networks, but never this close to home. Watching your own street turn against you is something different, something personal. I scrolled through the thread until I found Karen's comment, calm and polished. "Our community officers acted with professionalism. We value safety and transparency. We're reviewing the incident." Reviewing, like it was an internal investigation. That word sent a chill through me. Because in the Bureau, review means one thing: your record's under scrutiny. By noon, the video had reached my office email. A short note followed. "Agent Turner, please be advised that this content has raised concerns about public conduct. Report to Internal Affairs, HQ, 9 a.m. tomorrow." No signature, no context, just the cold efficiency of bureaucracy in motion. That afternoon, I took a slow walk through the neighborhood. People avoided eye contact. One woman who'd waved at me the day I moved in now crossed the street when she saw me coming. A couple of kids playing basketball stopped dribbling and stared until I turned the corner. Every camera above every garage seemed to follow me. I could feel it. Those tiny blinking LEDs, watching, recording, feeding some private network I hadn't been invited to. I noticed one mounted high on a lamppost near my house. It wasn't a city model, too new, too sleek. I took a photo and ran it through a facial recognition metadata scan when I got home. The serial number traced back to a vendor in Nevada that specialized in private surveillance systems for gated communities. Only one problem: Brookhaven Ridge wasn't a gated community. I sent the info to Alvarez. Within minutes, he called back. "Those cameras are registered under a shell company, Silver Shield Security," he said. "The same people whose SUV was parked near your driveway." That's when I knew this wasn't about neighborhood watch or property values. It was organized, funded, controlled. Alvarez promised to dig deeper. I trusted him. He was one of the few cops I'd worked with who didn't scare easy. As night fell, I sat on the porch with the lights off, watching. 2 black SUVs drove by, slow and deliberate. The same route, same hour, both nights. When one of them stopped at the intersection, I caught the faint glimmer of a drone light above the trees. Small, silent, steady. I recorded everything: timestamps, license plates, flight paths, habit, survival. Then, around 10 p.m., my phone buzzed again. Unknown number, text only. "You don't belong here." No emoji, no punctuation, just those 4 words. I stared at the screen, the glow reflecting off my coffee cup, and thought about something my old mentor used to say. The first step to control is isolation. Karen was isolating me, digitally, socially, professionally, piece by piece. And the worst part? It was working. But she'd made one mistake. She thought fear would make me quiet. It never does, not with people like me. That night, I started a new case file on my laptop. Title line: Brookhaven Ridge HOA, Unauthorized Law Enforcement Operations. If Karen wanted a war of records, I'd fight it her way. Only mine would hold up in court. By morning, I'd slept maybe an hour. The house was silent, but my mind wasn't. Every creak in the floorboards felt like another reminder that I'd lost control of my own story. At 8:43 a.m., my phone buzzed. The caller ID read, "Director Cole, FBI HQ." I took a deep breath before answering. "Turner." Cole's voice came through clipped and cold. "Jack, I need you at headquarters, now. Internal Affairs has questions." "Questions about what?" "You'll find out when you get here." The line went dead. I stared at the phone for a long moment, feeling that dull ache in my chest that comes when something sacred starts to crack. When I arrived at the bureau, everything felt wrong. The security guard who usually greeted me barely made eye contact. 2 analysts stopped whispering when I passed their cubicles. Gossip moves fast in a building full of investigators. Cole's office was on the 7th floor. Sterile, quiet, the kind of place where bad news lives. I knocked once. "Come in," he said. The blinds were half drawn, slicing sunlight across the desk. Cole stood by the window, jacket off, tie loosened. A file sat open in front of him, thick with printed pages. My name was on the tab. He didn't ask me to sit. "We've received multiple complaints from your neighborhood," he began, voice even. "Claims of intimidation, verbal threats, unprofessional conduct, 10 signatures." I forced a breath. "Those statements are false. They're part of a harassment campaign run by a neighbor, Karen Miller." He turned slowly, arms folded. "Karen Miller?" "Yes. She's behind the fake HOA police. She hired a private security company to impersonate officers." Cole's jaw tightened. "We looked into it. The company's registered and licensed." "That's not the same as authorized," I said. "They're enforcing laws that don't exist." He exhaled through his nose, weary. "Jack, I've known you a long time. You're a good agent. But this," he gestured to the file, "this looks bad. Neighbors, local law enforcement, even the HOA board have filed complaints. It's a pattern." I stepped forward. "The HOA board doesn't exist. The association dissolved 2 years ago." Cole's eyes flicked up at me, sharp, searching. "You're saying all these people coordinated a conspiracy against you?" I hated how that sounded out loud. "I'm saying someone's manufacturing it. Someone with influence." He walked back to his desk, lowered his voice. "You're being accused of threatening community officers. There's even video evidence." My pulse jumped. "The edited footage? You've seen it?" He nodded grimly. "Internal Affairs did. They're not convinced it's doctored." "Then they're not looking hard enough." "Jack," he rubbed his temples, "you've been through a lot these past few years. Maybe it's time you took some leave. Clear your head." There it was, the bureaucratic knife wrapped in sympathy. I stared at him. "You think I'm losing it?" He didn't answer, which told me enough. I took a slow breath, lowering my voice. "Sir, I have evidence, documents, names, surveillance footage that prove Karen's orchestrating this. I just need time to compile it." Cole's tone softened, but his eyes didn't. "You'll have 48 hours before Internal Affairs escalates. After that, I can't help you." 48 hours. 2 days to prove I wasn't the villain in my own neighborhood. "Understood," I said quietly. Cole hesitated. "Jack, off the record, keep your head down. Whoever's pulling strings here isn't playing small." I nodded, then left before my temper could follow me out. The elevator ride down felt like free fall. Each floor I passed, another piece of my career peeled away. By the time the doors opened, I wasn't sure if I was walking out as an agent or just another name in a pending review. Outside, the DC air felt heavier than usual. I stood in the parking lot for a moment, staring at my reflection in the car window. I'd spent 2 decades chasing corruption. Foreign, domestic, organized, corporate. But I'd never imagined it could bloom right next door, watered by gossip and fear. When I turned the ignition, my phone buzzed again. Unknown number, text only. "Careful who you talk to at HQ." No name, no reply. I looked around the lot. No one in sight, but the feeling in my gut said otherwise. That night, I opened my laptop and began piecing together everything. Karen's fake HOA paperwork, Alvarez's license plate data, the shell company records, the altered video timestamps. If I couldn't convince my own superiors, I'd have to build a case they couldn't ignore. Because if Karen had managed to reach this high into the Bureau's walls, she wasn't just a neighbor with control issues. She was part of something far bigger, and I was running out of time to prove it. I met Officer Miguel Alvarez 2 years ago on a joint task force. He was local PD, I was Bureau liaison, the kind of cop who didn't need a badge to command a room. Calm, deliberate, impossible to intimidate. When you've seen the same kind of chaos, you recognize the quiet ones who don't flinch. That's why I called him. He picked up on the second ring. "Turner," he said, voice steady. "Heard your name's lighting up the rumor mill." "Then you've heard half the story," I replied. "Which half's true?" "The part where somebody's impersonating law enforcement to shake down my neighborhood." A pause. Then, "You at your house?" "Yeah." "I'll swing by." 20 minutes later, his patrol SUV pulled into my driveway. No lights, no siren, just quiet professionalism. He stepped out, tall, weathered, a calm and human form. He took one look at the cameras mounted on the lamppost. Those yours? Nope. Installed without permit? He frowned. Private surveillance on public easement. That's illegal. I nodded. They're linked to Silver Shield Security, a Nevada-registered shell. Alvarez crossed his arms. Karen Miller's company? Indirectly. She's using them through a front business. The HOA pays the invoices, money from bogus fines. He gave a low whistle. Smart, funds her own enforcement, hides it behind community maintenance. Exactly, I said. And now they've gone federal, sending doctored evidence to my office. Alvarez rubbed his jaw. That explains the pressure you're getting. Someone wants you tied up in internal review while they run the operation clean. Yeah, I muttered. And I've got 48 hours before HQ decides I'm the problem. He nodded slowly. All right, let's turn the light back on them. We spent the next 2 hours in my kitchen, 2 cups of black coffee and a laptop full of secrets. I showed him the files, HOA financial records, timestamps from the surveillance feeds, shell companies routing payments through 3 states. Alvarez scrolled in silence, eyes narrowing. These accounts, look at the routing numbers, he said. Same bank chain used by 2 other fake security outfits I ran into last year. Small towns, homeowner communities, always the same pattern. Intimidation, fines, property seizures. Who's behind them? I asked. He shook his head. Nobody ever caught. Paper trails end in corporate dead zones. I leaned back, exhaling. It's organized, Miguel, not some HOA feud. This is a network. He looked up. Then we build our own. He handed me a flash drive. Encrypted. Plug this in and record everything from your home cams and comm logs. I'll mirror the footage through my department system. Off the books. You sure about that? He smiled faintly. You helped me once when Internal tried to hang me out to dry. Call this even. As the sun went down, he walked the perimeter of my yard, scanning with his flashlight. The beam caught small lenses glinting under the eaves, hidden cameras. He muttered, "Damn, they're everywhere." "Welcome to suburban warfare," I said. He chuckled softly. "You always did pick quiet places to retire." When he left, the street felt emptier than before, but a strange comfort settled in my chest. Finally, I wasn't alone. Around midnight, he texted me a photo, a Silver Shield invoice he'd pulled from county records. The billing address wasn't Nevada, it was DC. A suite number in the same building as the Bureau's Facilities Oversight Office. I stared at the image for a long time. It didn't make sense, unless someone in the system was protecting them. That thought hit harder than any threat Karen could make. I closed the laptop, poured one last cup of cold coffee, and watched the empty street through the blinds. For the first time in weeks, I had an ally. But it also meant one thing. If they knew I had help, Alvarez would become their next target. I whispered to myself, "Hang in there, Miguel," because in my world, allies don't stay safe for long. It was close to midnight when the knock came. 3 short raps, hesitant. I almost didn't answer. These days, opening the door after dark felt like flipping a coin. But then I heard her voice, small, trembling. "Jack, it's Tamara, please. I didn't know where else to go." I unlocked the deadbolt and opened the door. Tamara stood there, clutching a manila folder against her chest. Her eyes were red, hair pulled into a messy bun, slippers soaked from the dew on the lawn. She looked like someone who'd run out of safe places. "Come in," I said gently. She stepped inside and glanced around like she expected cameras even in my living room. Maybe she wasn't wrong. I poured her a glass of water. "What happened?" She handed me the folder. "They came to my house tonight. Said I was in violation for having guests after 9 p.m. Guests? My sister came over to help with the kids' homework," she whispered. "They said her car wasn't registered with the HOA and they issued me a fine, $500. I opened the folder. Inside were photos, grainy night shots of her driveway, her front door, her children's bicycles on the porch. The timestamp matched the hour she'd texted me earlier. "They're watching us, Jack. Every night." Her voice cracked on the last word. I felt that familiar anger simmer low, the kind that comes when fear turns to exhaustion. "Who delivered this?" I asked. She hesitated. 2 men, dressed like before, the same uniforms. One of them said, You don't want to end up like the others. The others? She nodded quickly. The Harrisons. You remember them? They moved out last month. People said it was sudden, but I heard they got 3 fines in 1 week. Then their tires were slashed. The husband got fired 2 days later. He said Karen called his employer. I clenched my jaw. Defamation, extortion, intimidation, all under a fake HOA. Tamara looked at me like she wanted to believe someone could stop it. Can you do something? You're FBI. You can make this end, right? I wanted to say yes. I really did. But the truth was harder. I'm working on it, I said quietly. But you need to stay calm. Keep everything, letters, fines, photos, receipts. Don't confront them. She nodded, trembling. They already know I talked to you. When I left my house, someone was parked at the corner with the engine running. I moved to the window and peeked through the blinds. A dark sedan sat half a block away, idling under the streetlight. No markings, no plates. They're not subtle, I murmured. Tamara wrapped her arms around herself. They want to make examples of us. They're overplaying their hand, I said. Once they cross into threat territory, I can act. But will anyone listen? I turned back to her. They will, eventually. That wasn't a promise, it was a vow. She stayed a while longer, mostly silent, sipping water while I documented her evidence. I could see the weight on her shoulders, single mother, 2 kids, working night shifts just to pay mortgage. People like Karen preyed on that. Fear was her currency. Before Tamara left, she paused at the door. You think she'll stop? I met her eyes. No, but I think she's scared too. Of what? Of losing control. She gave a weak smile. Then maybe she already has. After she drove off, I stood in the doorway a long time. The street was still, but not peaceful. It was that kind of silence that comes after something breaks, but before anyone admits it. I walked back inside, sat down at the table, and added Tamara's folder to my case file. Another victim, another witness, another crack in Karen's empire. Then I noticed something new. An envelope slid under my front door. No stamp, no markings, just a single sheet inside, typed in bold. You're turning people against us. Stop before someone gets hurt. No signature, no mistake. I folded the note, placed it in a plastic sleeve, and labeled it Exhibit 17, Threat Communication. If they wanted to play intimidation, they picked the wrong man. That night, I didn't sleep. I watched the monitors until dawn. And for the first time, I realized this wasn't just about my career or my reputation. It was about every person like Tamara. Good, quiet people who just wanted peace. And I'd be damned if I let fear take that from them. By the next morning, I'd uploaded every file Tamara gave me into a secure drive, off the bureau's grid, mirrored to a ghost server Alvarez set up years ago. That's when the pattern started to take shape. Each violation notice, each fine, each community enforcement record, all of it pointed to the same vendor, Silver Shield Security LLC. The payments funneled through identical invoice templates, but with different shell names: Greenpoint, Safe Haven, Blue Line Management, all registered to P.O. boxes in Nevada, Florida, and Virginia. It wasn't a local scam anymore. It was a web. I called Alvarez. You sitting down? Always am when the news is bad. I think Silver Shield's running copycat HOAs across 3 states, all with identical safety divisions, all extorting residents under false authority. He whistled low. That's organized racketeering. You're talking federal territory. I know, I said, but I can't open a file while Internal Affairs has me flagged. You'll need to move first. All right, he said. Let's meet off-grid. We chose a diner 30 miles south, the kind that still had paper menus and coffee that tasted like it remembered the 80s. Alvarez sat in the corner booth, facing the door. Always facing the door. He slid a folder across the table. County records, utility filings, and one interesting lease agreement. I flipped it open. Inside was a photo of an office complex, Suite 4B, Langston Holdings. Langston? I said. I've seen that name before. Same owner behind Silver Shield's Nevada P.O. box. I frowned. And Langston Holdings just leased property from a development trust called, get this, Brookhaven Investments. The name hit like static in my head. Brookhaven, as in my neighborhood. He nodded. Karen Miller's listed as a trustee. The waitress poured coffee without asking. Alvarez waited until she left before continuing. Your HOA is not a front. It's the prototype. Karen's running the pilot for a national model. Fake governance, real revenue. I leaned back, exhaling slowly. She's not just power hungry. She's being paid to be. We sat in silence a moment, letting the noise of the diner fill the gaps. Silverware clinking, a kid laughing at the next booth, the hum of a world that had no idea it was being watched. Then Alvarez's expression changed. Heads up, black SUV across the street, same type from your neighborhood. I didn't turn right away, just lifted the coffee cup, using the reflection in the window. 2 men inside, pretending to scroll phones. Too still, too alert. They followed you? He asked. Maybe, or maybe you. He smiled without humor. Guess we're both popular these days. We finished our coffee like nothing was wrong, paid in cash, and walked out opposite doors. I circled around the block and caught a glimpse of the SUV creeping along the curb. When it turned toward Alvarez's side, I crossed behind it, memorizing the plate. Except there wasn't one, just a blank frame. I pulled out my phone, snapped a photo, and texted it to him. No plate, north lot, 2 targets. 5 minutes later, I heard the low growl of an engine revving. Alvarez's cruiser cut across the lot, lights off, blocking the SUV's exit. The driver panicked, hit reverse, clipped a trash bin, and tore down the back alley. Alvarez jumped out, weapon drawn. Police! Stop the vehicle! It didn't stop. He fired once, just a tire shot, controlled. The SUV fishtailed, hit a lamppost, and stalled. We approached fast. The passenger door swung open, and a man in a tactical vest bolted. I caught him halfway across the lot, tackled him hard onto the pavement. He went down swinging, shouting, "You don't understand. It's bigger than her." Alvarez cuffed him. We'll find out how big soon enough. Inside the SUV we found burner phones, printed HOA directories, and a tablet logged into an encrypted dashboard titled Silver Shield Operations, Zone 3. Alvarez whistled low. Zone 3, meaning there's a 1 and 2, I nodded grimly. And maybe 4. We took photos, pulled the data card, and left before local backup could arrive. Later that night, I sat at my desk, replaying the suspect's words in my mind. It's bigger than her. I opened the tablet's extracted files. There it was. A list of over 40 community partnerships across 6 states. HOA names, addresses, even liaisons. And under Liaison 3B, Brookhaven Ridge, one name stood out. Karen Miller, but right below it, another, Cole Harrison. I froze. That was my director's full name. For a long time, I just stared at the screen, the cursor blinking like a heartbeat. Karen hadn't just gotten inside the bureau, she'd started there. By dawn, the data from the tablet was fully decrypted. Names, dates, payments, and one headline that burned into my screen. Federal Oversight Liaison, Director C.S. Harrison. Cole, my director, the same man who told me to keep my head down. I stared at it for a long time, waiting for some other explanation. Clerical error, mistaken identity, shared name, anything that made sense. But in my gut, I already knew. I'd seen that kind of quiet complicity before, in field ops gone sideways, when good men started turning bad because paperwork was easier than conscience. By noon, I was standing in front of his office again. Same blinds, same silence. Only this time, I didn't knock. Cole looked up as I stepped in, his expression unreadable. "Jack, you look like hell." "Been busy?" I said. "Mind if we talk?" He closed the file on his desk, too smoothly. "About what?" "About Brookhaven Ridge, about Karen Miller, about the Silver Shield network you've been funding." His hand froze mid-motion, just for a second. Then he gave a small, humorless smile. "You've been digging where you shouldn't. Someone had to," I said. "You knew this was happening. You let her run it." He leaned back in his chair, studying me. "You ever wonder, Jack, why the Bureau doesn't get involved in neighborhood disputes? Because it's a waste of federal resources." "This isn't a dispute," I snapped. "It's organized racketeering, using fake police to extort citizens." He sighed, almost fatherly. "You always had a talent for seeing patterns that weren't there." "I've got evidence, Cole." He smiled again. But there was nothing kind about it this time. "Then you'd better hope your evidence survives the audit coming tomorrow." My pulse slowed. "You're shutting me down." "No," he said softly. I'm protecting the Bureau from an agent who's lost perspective. I took a step closer. Don't do this. He stood too, voice low and controlled. You don't understand how this works anymore, Jack. The Bureau runs on perception. Karen's people help maintain it. Neighborhood order, civilian cooperation, local control. It's what Washington wants. You think we fund community policing programs for fun? So, you're telling me this whole thing, fake HOA police, surveillance, intimidation, it's sanctioned? He didn't answer directly, just said, sometimes it's easier to manage the public when they police themselves. I stared at him, feeling the floor tilt under me. You've crossed the line. No, he said calmly. I erased it. I don't remember leaving the office. 1 minute I was standing there, the next I was outside in the parking lot, breathing hard, fists clenched. Every instinct screamed to expose him, but that would take time, proof, strategy, and right now he controlled both. My phone buzzed again. Alvarez. You okay? He asked. Define okay. He didn't press. You were right. Silver Shield's shell accounts lead back to DC oversight budgets. Small-scale civic security grants. Somebody's laundering taxpayer money through neighborhood enforcement projects. That somebody is my boss, I said quietly. The line went silent for a long beat. Then Alvarez said, You sure you want to keep going with this? If he's in it, they'll bury you before you hit send. I looked across the lot, watching 2 black sedans glide past HQ's gate. They already started. Then we fight smart, he said. Get me everything you've got. I'll move it through a state contact, outside federal channels. Do it, but keep yourself clean. They'll come for you next. He chuckled dryly. Wouldn't be the first time. That night, I went home to a power outage. The whole street was dark, but only my house had the breakers tripped. Coincidence, maybe. But the air smelled faintly of burnt plastic, like someone had tampered with the junction box. I grabbed a flashlight and stepped outside. The sky was moonless, quiet except for the hum of distant generators. That's when I saw it, on my porch, under the doormat. An envelope. Same as before, no markings. Inside, a single photograph, me and Alvarez at the diner, talking. The camera angle was high, like from a drone. On the back, typed in clean block letters. You're not as invisible as you think. I sat there in the dark, holding the photo, feeling the last illusions of safety drain away. Karen wasn't the threat anymore. She was just a mask. The real danger wore a suit and worked behind tinted glass. And I just accused him to his face. I opened my laptop, powered it through a backup battery, and began encrypting my files to multiple locations. Cloud backups, external drives, a secure courier drop. If I disappeared, the evidence wouldn't. Before shutting down, I recorded a voice memo. If this reaches anyone outside the Bureau, my name is Special Agent Jack Turner. I am investigating the unauthorized use of federal security programs by internal operatives. My director, Cole Harrison, is directly linked to civilian extortion networks. If you're hearing this, it means I didn't make it. I saved it, encrypted it, and hid the drive behind the breaker panel. Then I sat back, staring at the dark window. Somewhere out there, Karen Miller was still pulling strings, but now I knew whose hand held them. And for the first time in my life, I didn't know who the enemy really was, the criminal outside my house, or the one who signed my paychecks. When you've been in the Bureau long enough, you stop believing in coincidences. People say wrong place, wrong time, but in my world, those are coordinates. Someone puts you there, someone plans it. By the next morning, Alvarez and I had a plan. Simple. Dangerous, clean. We'd feed them bait, a trail of false intel pointing to a hidden drive in my garage, containing unreleased HOA recordings that tied Karen to her private enforcers. We'd leak the location through a burner email routed to one of Silver Shield's proxy servers. Then we'd wait. If Karen's people came for it, we'd have our proof. If the Bureau came first, we'd know Cole was running interference. Either way, someone would show their hand. That night, we wired my property with motion sensors, hidden body cams, and a backup uplink that streamed directly to Alvarez's off-site recorder. He sat in his cruiser 2 blocks away, windows tinted, laptop glowing faint blue in the dark. I stayed inside, lights off, coffee cold, service pistol holstered on the table. Midnight passed, 1 a.m., 2, Nothing. Just the hum of cicadas and the distant buzz of a generator from the next street over. Then, 3 soft clicks from the side gate. Lockpicks. I went still, breathing through my nose. Through the monitor feed, I saw them. 2 figures in dark tactical gear, faces covered, flashlights red-filtered. They moved with trained precision, not the sloppy bravado of HOA bullies. These were professionals. One whispered into a mic, "Target location confirmed, moving to retrieve." I texted Alvarez a single word, "Contact." He replied instantly, "Hold position." The first man cut power to the security lights. The second pried open the side door with a crowbar wrapped in cloth to muffle the sound. They stepped inside. I let them move through the hallway, slow, deliberate, searching. One whispered, "Garage is this way." That was their mistake. The moment they crossed the threshold, the floor sensor tripped. A flashbang detonated, a controlled one, non-lethal, just enough to disorient. I stepped out from behind the kitchen island, weapon raised. "Federal agent, drop it." One turned, blinded, stumbled backward, hitting the shelf. The other lunged for his sidearm. Before he could draw, Alvarez burst through the back door. Gun leveled. "Hands up! Now!" They froze. The taller one cursed under his breath. "You don't know who you're messing with." "Then enlighten me," I said. He hesitated, then muttered, "We're under contract. Direct authorization." "From who?" Alvarez barked. He didn't answer. So I ripped the comm mic from his collar. It was still transmitting. I raised it to my mouth. "This is Special Agent Jack Turner. Whoever's listening, you're in violation of federal law. Identify yourself." Static. Then a voice I knew too well. "Stand down, Agent Turner. That's an order." "Cole." The room went silent except for the hum of the open line. Alvarez's eyes widened. "That's your director?" I didn't lower my weapon. "You sent them, Cole?" His voice was calm, like he was reading from a script. "You're interfering with an internal investigation. Surrender your weapon and all data immediately." "You mean the data that proves your little partnership with Silver Shield?" Static again. Then, "You've gone too far, Jack. Walk away." I stared at the mic, heart steady. "I can't. Not anymore." Then the line went dead. We cuffed both operatives and secured the scene. Alvarez photographed everything. Their gear, fake warrants, encrypted phones. On one of the men's forearms was a tattoo, a silver shield over a snake. He caught me looking and said quietly, "You think this ends with her? You're wrong." We loaded them into the cruiser and drove to an abandoned storage yard Alvarez used for evidence holding. No paper trail. He turned off the engine. "You realize this just made us fugitives in our own departments." "Yeah," I said. "Feels like home." He cracked a dry smile. "What now?" "Now we finish it." We spent the next 4 hours decrypting one of the operatives' phones. Inside, a text thread with contact initials. KM and CH, Karen Miller, Cole Harrison. The messages were time-stamped just before the break-in. CH, proceed with extraction, secure the drive, neutralize resistance if needed. KM, consider it done. He won't have the nerve to fight back. Alvarez leaned back, whistling low. Well, she was wrong about that. I exhaled slowly, the adrenaline finally catching up. We've got them. He nodded. Yeah, but they've got reach. By morning, every system you touch will light up like a warning beacon. I know, I said. That's why we don't go online. Then how do we expose them? I looked at him, the answer already forming in my head. Public. They built their power in the dark. So we drag it into daylight. He grinned faintly. Press? Better, I said. The people they've been preying on. I stood outside as dawn broke, the air cool, the first rays of sun cutting across the street like searchlights. Karen thought she could bury truth under fear. Cole thought he could wrap corruption in protocol, but they both forgot one thing. The moment you try to control people with lies, sooner or later, somebody fights back with truth. And I was about to hand them a spotlight they couldn't escape. The meeting was set for Saturday evening at the community center, the same place where Karen had held her HOA orientation nights. Only this time, the tables were turned. Alvarez arranged for 2 uniformed deputies, real ones, to stand by the exit. I'd contacted a few trusted residents, Tamara among them, and told them to spread the word. Mandatory HOA assembly, open to all homeowners. Karen loved an audience. I was about to give her one. By 6 p.m., the room was packed. Rows of folding chairs, murmurs of curiosity, and that faint smell of burnt coffee and paper flyers. Karen stood at the front, her trademark smile in place, wearing a cream blazer and that same overconfidence that had kept everyone in check for months. "Good evening, neighbors," she began brightly. "Before we get started, I just want to remind everyone, order and respect are what make our community strong." She didn't notice me at first. I stayed near the back, arms crossed, watching. When she finally saw me, her voice faltered just slightly. "Oh, Agent Turner, glad you could join us." "Wouldn't miss it," I said. I stepped forward, holding a folder thick with documents. Alvarez followed, silent but steady. Karen's eyes flicked toward him, then back to me. "If you're here about that misunderstanding last week—" "Not a misunderstanding," I cut in, "an investigation." The room went still. She laughed, that brittle, rehearsed laugh of hers. "Oh, come now. You're not here in an official capacity." "Actually," I said, "I'm here as a resident. And as someone who's tired of being lied to." I placed the folder on the podium, flipped it open, and began laying out the evidence. Fake citations, altered footage, bank transfers from Silver Shield Security to Karen's personal accounts. And finally, the signed directives between her and Director Cole Harrison. Each page landed with a sound that echoed across the room like a gavel strike. "This," I said, "is the real HOA, a money funnel, a control mechanism, a surveillance system you never agreed to join." Murmurs filled the hall. Confusion, shock, anger. Karen's mask cracked. "You're bluffing. None of that's admissible. It's stolen data." Alvarez stepped forward, badge glinting under the fluorescent lights. "Actually, ma'am, it's under active investigation by state authorities. You might want to watch your next words." Her gaze darted around, searching for allies. But the crowd that once followed her now pulled back. Even her closest supporters looked down at the floor. I continued. "You told everyone these community officers were protecting them, but they weren't law enforcement. They were paid enforcers, operating under false authority." A voice from the crowd, an older man, spoke up. "She fined me $3,000 for repainting my fence." Another woman. "She threatened to foreclose my house." The room was unraveling. Karen raised her hands. "Listen to me. This is all part of a smear campaign. He's trying to distract you from his own misconduct." "Then explain this," I said, and held up the photo. The drone shot of me and Alvarez at the diner. "You had your people spying on federal agents. Under whose authorization?" Her lips parted, but no sound came out. "You wanted power," I said softly. "You got it, and now you get the consequences." Alvarez signaled to the deputies. "Ms. Miller, you're under arrest for impersonating law enforcement, wire fraud, and conspiracy to defraud the public." For the first time, Karen's composure shattered. "You think this ends with me?" she hissed. "You don't know what you've started." "Maybe not," I said, "but I know where it ends, for you." The deputies moved in, cuffed her hands, and led her toward the exit. Cameras flashed, neighbors recording, documenting, reclaiming their own truth. As she passed me, Karen turned one last time. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "He'll come for you next." "Let him," I said. "At least now the world's watching." When the doors closed behind her, the room erupted. Not in applause, but in relief. People hugged, cried, asked questions. Tamara approached me, tears in her eyes. "Is it over?" I looked at her, then at Alvarez. "Not yet, but for the first time it's in daylight." He nodded. "Sunlight's the best disinfectant." Outside, the evening air felt cleaner, sharper, the kind of air that comes after a storm finally breaks. But as I walked to my car, I couldn't shake the echo of her last words. "He'll come for you next." And somehow, deep down, I knew she wasn't wrong. It took less than a month for the neighborhood to change. The fake patrols vanished overnight. The phony citations stopped. People walked their dogs again, waved at each other again. Kids played basketball in driveways that had once been under review. For the first time in months, Brookhaven Ridge felt alive. But order, real order, never comes cheap. Karen Miller's arrest hit the local news first, then state, then national. Neighborhood Queenpin charged an HOA police fraud scheme. The story ran for days. Her mugshot, no makeup, no smile, became a symbol of suburban corruption. Behind the headlines, though, something quieter happened. A memo leaked from the Bureau, an internal audit, a line item about unapproved civilian oversight programs. And at the bottom of that memo, one name had been redacted, but I didn't need to read it to know whose it was. Director Cole Harrison. He resigned the same week Karen was indicted. Personal reasons, the press release said. No charges filed, no follow-up questions. The Bureau moved on, like it always does. One Friday morning, my boss called me in. He looked different, lighter, somehow. Internal Affairs cleared your record, he said, sliding a file across the desk. No disciplinary marks, you're back on full duty. I nodded slowly. Appreciate it. He leaned back. They also wanted me to tell you, off the record, you were right. About her. About all of it. Doesn't feel like winning, I said. He smiled faintly. It never does. We shook hands, and for the first time in months, I felt the weight lift. Just a little, but deep down, a small voice whispered, not yet. That weekend, I drove through the neighborhood again. The lawns looked green, the mailboxes freshly painted, the air peaceful. Yet every now and then, I'd catch a glance. Someone watching from a window, curtains shifting. Fear doesn't fade that fast. Tamara was out front trimming her roses. She smiled when she saw me. Looks like the world's back to normal, she said. Yeah, I answered. Or close enough. She hesitated. They said Karen's making a deal. Cooperation for leniency. I nodded. I heard. She's naming names. Tamara frowned. You think she'll drag more people down? Maybe, I said quietly. Maybe that's what scares them. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, a single lamp casting long shadows across the walls. On the table lay the last piece of evidence from the Silver Shield files, a list of funding accounts. Most had been frozen, one hadn't. Account holder, CH. Community Renewal Initiative. The same initials, the same pattern, different name. They'd simply changed the label, shifted the money, and started over somewhere else. I leaned back, exhaling slowly. Order restored, I muttered to myself. At least for now. My phone buzzed with a message from Alvarez. Got a lead. Out of state. Same tactics, new names. You in? I stared at the screen for a long moment. Then I typed back, always. As I shut off the lamp, the neighborhood outside was quiet again. Peaceful, ordinary, just like it had been the day I first moved in. But I knew better now. Beneath every perfect suburb, there's always something rotting under the grass. All it takes is one person like Karen, or one man like Cole, to bring it crawling to the surface. I holstered my badge, checked the lock on the door, and whispered into the dark, let's see how deep this goes. 3 months later, the leaves turned amber, the air sharper. Brookhaven Ridge had settled into its new rhythm. Yard sales, bake-offs, the faint hum of normal life. But I'd learned that normalcy is a fragile disguise. Scratch the surface, and the cracks start whispering. The Bureau reassigned me to a joint federal-state task force. White-collar crimes, municipal corruption, the kind of slow-burning cases most agents avoided. It suited me fine. There's something comforting about hunting ghosts when you've already been haunted. One morning, Alvarez called. Got something strange, he said. Different county, same pattern. Fake HOA, phony cops, same shell fund names, just tweaked. Location? I asked. Riverview Estates, 2 hours south. I almost laughed. Of course it's got a nice name, he sighed. Meet me there this weekend. Bring that paranoia of yours. Might need it. Friday night. I packed light. Just a duffel, my badge, and a copy of Karen's old records. Before I left, I stood by the window, watching my quiet street glow under the porch lights. For once, no patrols, no threats, no false citations, just silence. Still, something tugged at me, an instinct I couldn't name. I glanced toward the curb. Across the street, under the oak tree, sat a car I didn't recognize. Dark, older model, lights off. At first, I thought it was a neighbor's visitor. Then I noticed the faint glint of a lens behind the windshield, a camera. I stepped outside slowly, pretending to check my mailbox. The car didn't move. When I turned back toward the house, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Nice neighborhood. Hope it stays that way. No signature, no context. I looked up again. The car was gone, just like that. The next day, Alvarez and I met in a diner off I-87, the kind of place where the coffee never stops pouring, and the locals never stop watching. He slid a file across the table. You were right. Funding lines match the old Silver Shield network. Different directors, but same playbook. I flipped through the pages. HOA letters, forged permits, extortion trails, familiar ghosts with new names. He leaned closer. You think Cole's behind it again? Not directly, I said. Men like him don't vanish. They replicate. Someone else picked up the torch. Alvarez nodded grimly. Then it's the same game, different board. Exactly, I said. And this time, we start before it spreads. He smirked. You always did like fighting uphill. Best views at the top, I said, finishing my coffee. As I drove home that night, the highway stretched empty under a full moon. The radio crackled with distant static, like whispers half heard. When I pulled into my driveway, something waited on the porch. A small square package wrapped in brown paper. No return address. I tore it open carefully. Inside was a single USB drive. The label read, "For Agent Turner, from a friend." I plugged it into my encrypted laptop, isolating it from the network. One file, a video, grainy drone footage, time-stamped just 2 days earlier. It showed me, leaving the bureau, walking to my car, looking over my shoulder. The camera zoomed in, followed me down the street, then froze on my front door. A final message appeared across the screen in clean white letters. You stopped one network. You didn't stop us. The feed cut out. I sat there in silence, heart steady, the faint hum of the laptop filling the room. Then I smiled, small, tired, unafraid. Let's begin again, I whispered, and I hit record.